Everybody. Welcome to another episode from Pivot in Progress. My name is Arjun, and I'm here to discuss a very, uh, I would say, very essential topic for anybody who is currently thinking about their next career move, which is how do you navigate the current job market bloodbath that's happening right now across the globe. We have seen the unprecedented amount of layoffs happening over the last 2.5, 3 years almost now, and the signs are not indicating that it would stop anytime soon. With AI, with companies downsizing and cost cutting, it's just become very tricky to navigate the market, unlike what it used to be. Let's say even 5 years ago. And I have two very special people to discuss their experiences, their learnings about how to navigate such markets with me today. We have Yash Prasad and Niharika Sharma. They are here already in backstage, so I'll just bring them up.
Hey Arjun.
Hi Yash.
Hey
Hey
Arjun,
Niharika.
hi Yash.
Niharika.
Welcome again. We were just talking a second ago, and I'm so glad to have you both with me together again after, I don't know, it's been a few months. Always good to see familiar faces, especially when it comes to talking about such stressful things that people are currently experiencing in the job market.
Yeah.
Um, I have talked about job search for almost 5 years now, but really, it's very interesting how things have changed drastically over these 5 years, even because when I first started, it was still a very positive atmosphere overall, right? And people used to really think about job search and career transitions as something which is opportunistic, optimistic, looking for the next rung in the ladder, doing something that they're passionate about. And gradually, that mindset has shifted a little bit towards this negative atmosphere that's today because of everything that's going on. So that's why we chose this topic. And what we can do is give a quick round of intros for people who might not know us. So I can go first, and then I'd love for both of you to share about yourselves as well. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Arjun, and I'm the founder at Pivot. Um, we started Pivot to ensure that anybody who's looking for personalized support during their career journey on different types of goals that they might be setting for themselves. It could be just a linear growth in the same career path. It could be a non-linear journey where you are changing your domain, your industry, level in the organization, country, or other inflection points. We want to be there for you, and we want to help you achieve that goal. So that's what I do today. We'll talk more about that during the course of this conversation. But first, I want to turn it over to Niharika. Niharika, welcome
Thank you, Arjun.
again. And thank you so much for making time for this. But I would love to just have you go, share a little bit about yourself and your journey
Sure.
so far.
Thank you for having me here, Arjun. It's a pleasure to have you and Yash be a partner in this session. I am Niharika. I have had good amount of experience in the SaaS industry. So I've been a SaaS marketer all my life. Carry roughly around 8.5 years of experience now. And I've worked with companies like Zycus, Freshworks, Loconav, and I'm recently heading marketing for a healthcare slash fintech startup called SaveIn, which is a healthcare marketplace, and we also do lending for services which are not typically covered by insurance, more into preventive and elective healthcare space.
Amazing. Great. Thanks for sharing that. And Yash, I
Yeah.
think you can go
Hey
ahead
guys.
next.
So firstly, Arjun, thank you so much for providing this platform to talk about something we all have been dreading pretty much day in and day out. Every time we're thinking about moving out from a job, or every time we're thinking about, hey, what's next? Um, Turns out, so we also technically met like this itself. That's how our conversation started. So quick context for everyone. Um, I I have been a generalist my entire life. Unlike Niharika, I haven't been a specialist at all to begin with, and I have had the experience of shifting multiple different industries. I started off with recruitment for investment banks to begin with, then eventually started selling ad spaces at Zomato for 5 years. Then ended up building the pay team at Cred. Took some time out, was trying to build out my own platform for animals to begin with. Then ended up making one of my biggest mistakes in a career, joining a job which I just said yes to for the money, but did not enjoy for a single bit. Then took a health break for almost like a good 6 to 8 months, and now I'm finally doing something of my own. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to be here, and really looking forward to being able to add value to the session from everything that's gone by.
Amazing. Thank you both. So, obviously we have worked together, and I think we can definitely talk about the collaboration and, exactly how your experience was in terms of navigating the market. But before we dive into that very, meat of this conversation, what I wanted to start with is just getting your perspective on what has really changed in the current job market over the last, let's say, 5 years or so. You both have been in the market for much longer than 5 years, right? And so have I. And I think most people who are in our TG would also be in that demographic. Now, I don't know what your experience was 5 years ago, since we just met more recently, about a year ago or so. But 5 years ago, things were quite different, right? Like, let's say 2019. Um, Typically, what people would do when they were thinking about their next career move, they would, refresh their profile, their CV, their LinkedIn. They would perhaps do a bit of networking with people in their close knit network, and then do a little bit of networking. And after that, in most cases, you would take maybe 2 3 months to land your next role, right? And if you were thinking about career transition, that was actually not that common 5 years ago. So most people were not even jumping, domains, industries in a very ambitious way. It was more organic or serendipitous if they were doing that. Now, today, things have become quite different, right? At least from my perspective. So that's where I want to bring you both in. We'll start with Niharika. Niharika, you have been mostly in marketing, but if you could still talk a little bit about, from your perspective, being in the same domain, how have things shaped up over the last 5 years? What's different according to you
Right. So
today?
I think 5 years ago, COVID was not there. So we were trying to operate in a very traditional setup. Whereas after introduction of COVID, everything went online, and we were also trying to um, disrupt this ecosystem that we were trying to work with. Um, Meanwhile, the quality of people that we were getting, in terms of whosoever was graduating in a who's had that kind of experience in an online setup, was not as, how do I say, equipped in order to be a part of organizations in such vicinities, which required more than just technical skills. People also need to add on to their soft skills, overall personality. They have to be street smart in order to get a job. It's not just the technical vocation knowledge that used to fetch jobs earlier. Now when you are in a market which is very competitive, which is very aggressive in nature, you have to be um, an overall presenter, if I have to put it in that way. So I think the overall development of an individual is something that people have finally started to look into before making a decision of whether we have to absorb this or this person into the organization or not. So that is my point of view.
Right. Yash, before I turn it over to you, I just want to ask the same question but in a slightly different angle, right? So 5 years ago, I think the average number of openings that an application would that a role opening would get would be somewhere around
Right.
100 or 250 maximum. Today, that has amplified to approximately 300 to 400
Correct.
applications per opening, right? So the amount of competition is obviously much higher in the job market today across the globe, especially at
Yeah.
mid-career levels and senior levels, right? So, given this increasing competition in the market, and there's not been a commensurate increase in the number of openings out there, so the demand supply dynamics
Right.
are way off in today's market. And I do value Niharika's point about that companies are starting to really delve in deeper when they are assessing profiles. But at the same time, it's becoming harder for companies to assess everybody because it takes
Yeah.
just much more manpower to go through so many applications, right? We've been hearing that from recruiters. Now, because of this, many challenges are there for job seekers. Can you talk a little bit about what do you think you and others around you have been experiencing in such kind of a
Okay.
competitive
So that's a
market?
packed question, Arjun. So honestly, what it used to be like in terms of how Niharika mentioned, right? Life 5 years ago was slightly different. How you also pointed out that for one role you would have, let's say, about 100 candidates come in, but the bandwidth that that one person in the company had was significantly higher to be able to sit through them, read through them, discuss about them, and then go back. I believe one of the things that has significantly changed also is the trust factor that goes into the entire process of building that relationship, right from applying to basically hearing back and then joining the company. That entire element has significantly changed. And one of the other things that for me personally and for a bunch of other people that I saw around, for instance, last year when we first started talking and when we were basically looking for roles that I had to apply to, the difference was that back in the day I would apply to maybe three roles to begin with and still end up getting, let's say, two interview rounds and at least end up landing one offer to begin with. And this time around, I remember in the 6 months that we were working together, it was what, about 120 applications sent out after having coming from companies like Red and Zomato, and still getting ghosted, still not being able to hear to begin with. So truth be told, it was, not only has it been a bloodbath, but the other challenge also has been is that automation tools that have started kicking in have also started in some places replacing that function that human being was doing in between, which was sitting down and validating or at least verifying that, hey,
Right.
this is a candidate we should reach out to. I think the process becoming too mechanic is where this challenge also started coming in, where a lot of good candidates would very easily get skipped over because the system didn't recognize it. Something happened with one of my very close friends as well, who now happens to be leading the legal and regulatory at one of the leading fintechs in the country. I remember him applying to his particular role a year and a half ago, and his CV got rejected because the system could not pick it up. And in the same 20 minutes, I had sent out a CV to the HR directly from my side. Not only did it get picked up, he's now been working in the company for the same 2.5 years at this point in time. So that goes to show the kind of flaw that
Mm.
exists, and the part where companies are unwilling to change that flaw, or or maybe trying but unable to kind of execute a successful way to kind of change that flaw in between, has become the challenge, where this pile seems to keep growing, where it could still very much be, let's say, 100 people per application,
Mm.
but is the company then focusing on 5 people that are required to now go through those profiles rather than one person going through 500 profiles, right? So these are some of these aspects, I think, that
Yeah.
really need to be looked upon. While a candidate can only do their best in terms of applying to the role or reaching out to the people or talking to the people within the company or their circle, I think it's this part of the function that also needs to change, where things become a lot more easier to begin with. If we kind of see how remote work has now again become challenging, like personally for me, I went from realizing that, hey, I could at one point in time enjoy going out into the world, working out with 100 people around me, to then suddenly enjoying the comfort of my home. Did that for 3 years when I was at Cred, and after 3 years of doing that, I realized, dude, I've gone mad. I can't. I'm somebody who thrives in a room full of people. I'm somebody who bounces off ideas with 10 other people to begin with, and I enjoy that. And my hard learning was after that 3.5, 4 year period of working from home, was that I can't do this. I need to go back. I need. Yes, it's painful to pick up your bag and go through that traffic. Yes, it's painful to deal with everything else there is, but that one element that helps you become better, that kind of helps you become undefeatable, I think we should not be giving up on that as well. I think somewhere that also kind of goes amiss in the process of
Mm.
repeatedly applying, repeatedly failing rejections. Now, in our case itself, when we would not hear back for like a huge time
Yeah.
from like companies to begin with, that rejection would also start feeling a bit internal when it had nothing to do with me. It had everything to do with the.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And just one thing that I wanted to, sorry to interject, but I think you're touching upon a very important point, which I want to emphasize on in a slightly different angle. That's the reason I wanted to share this. But you're talking about, like, say, the use of automation and AI into. Um,
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you both hear me? Okay, perfect. So yeah, the use of AI and automation in screening candidates, I think that is something that's becoming more and more common, and I think that's where you can actually scale the number of reviews that a recruiting team can do, but at the same time you have this challenge of not being able to provide a fair process and a fair judgment of all the applications with human set of eyes. That's kind of the trust factor that you're saying that we're losing as well. But AI has had its own impact in the market as well, in terms of earlier, let's say if you needed 10 engineers to do one job, today you need like 5 engineers or 6 engineers to do the same job, right? So AI is taking its own course, and then you have people kind of who have been laid off, also just creating more and more competition in the market. So I just want to get, I mean, Niharika, your or Yash, both of your perspectives on this. like these other factors that are also playing into the job market today. See, one is just things have been different since last 5 years. COVID was there. Now, we are in post-COVID era. Remote work was there. Now we are in post-remote work era. So those things are there. But I think some of the biggest elephants in the room are AI and layoffs, right? So how have these two things, let's say, according to you specifically, impacted? Have you, either when you were applying to jobs or now that you are at companies and perhaps you're either helping friends or hiring for your own companies, how are you seeing AI and layoffs kind of impact the job market? Um, Niharika, we'll start with you and then Yash will come back to
Arjun.
you
So
on
I
that.
think whenever there's an introduction of a new technology, it always comes with a set of pros and a sort of cons, right? While AI has significantly made our lives better in one way or the other, it has also come with its own set of challenges. Like, you cannot trust AI with 100% accuracy, whether it's in marketing terms, generating content, whether it's writing something, whether it's researching for something, because that is also picking up information from different areas, which again has been fed by humans. So it is not 100% accurate. And also adding up to what Yash mentioned in our last engagement, that the human element is very very crucial when it comes to deciding on what kind of profile would be a better fit. Sometimes it's not the qualification, or sometimes it's not the pedigree, sometimes it's the intent, which is actually very very difficult to find when the screening is happening from AI. For example, when I'm hiring for my team, I personally reach out to candidates. I try to set up multiple conversations and gauge whether, despite having a good college degree, or having a experience from well-renowned brand as an organization, do they have intent, do they have the hunger, do they have the characteristic which can make me believe, yes, this candidate might have not performed well in their previous organizations because of multiple reasons, but can do significantly better here when provided with enough opportunities and enough resources. So I think that human touch which we discussed about 5 minutes ago is of course missing. And intent cannot be captured by AI, because again, AI is also being made by humans. We also make mistakes, right? It's not something which has been thrown down from the sky. So um, how do I say, believing or eyeing on technology as a resource to make our lives better, of course, is a good idea. But whenever there is some sort of human intervention required, AI can help us chop resources into half, but it cannot completely remove it, right? You cannot work with an organization just full of robots. You will have to have somebody who's going to regulate that technology which is being built by humans. So I think introduction of human element, and then making sure that we are emotional beings, so we sometimes also put our blood and sweat when we are working in order to prove ourselves in a job. That cannot be gauged by AI. So building upon this is something that I would say is human element, and that social connect that one also develops while going through this process of applying for jobs, meeting recruiters, um, getting in touch with
Yeah.
interviewees, probably establishing a connection that might help them, let's say 5 years later, is missing when AI gets introduced in the system.
Yeah, I think really good points. I think some terrific points there. And, I want to build on top of this. And Yash, the question for you is this, right? See, in a era where we are going to have more and more competition in the job market, let's say going from 100 applicants a role to 300 or 400, and sometimes even up to 1,000. Literally, we have seen up to 1,000, 2,000 people applying to roles. I don't think there's any company which can manually handle that amount of workload, no matter how large your recruiting teams become, because it's not the optimal use of one's time really to go through that many applications. So they will be using technology, they will be using AI, and AI is more nascent right now. It's expected to become more sophisticated. But I think Niharika's point, in my view, is very valid. I wholeheartedly agree that intent is something that may take a lot of time for AI to actually be able to decipher, just based on the mechanical, algorithms that are typically there. Um, how do you think in such an era where we know that companies are not going to be able to physically, manually evaluate every profile, how do job seekers and candidates navigate that? Because you can't anymore just apply to a job on portal and hope that your
Absolutely.
profile gets
Yeah.
noticed, right? Because if you're competing with, let's say, 300 other people, and even though
Yeah.
you might have great pedigree,
Yeah.
skill set, and intent, it's not necessarily just through
Absolutely.
portal you'll get noticed. So how do people
So
navigate
I
that?
think the funnier version of this is basically saying that, hey, you stand with a billboard in the hand and say, Bhaiya, please, and do a version of that on LinkedIn. But I think being able to be the sore thumb, across in the crowd technically helps you stick out, right? I'll give you an example of somebody that Cred hired within 24 hours itself. Now, this is the same company that I interviewed for. The interview process, post my interviews, went on for 2.5 months. And I've seen people go through six months of the interview process in there to begin with, because they were very specific about the people they would bring in. So here's this kid that basically took some time out and did an entire research on what Cred as a product is basically. He wanted to join, I believe, the design team. So he then essentially went on to a few Figma or a few other tools that he basically used, redid a few parts of the app that he thought could look much better, and took a massive long shot by posting it outright on LinkedIn rather than even reaching out to anybody to begin with. Within 24 hours, we rolled out an offer to him, right? So you can technically do something like this as well. As you said, right, in today's era, just applying to jobs is no longer just applying to a portal, just following up with that HR or that hiring manager is no longer the thing that you can technically do, right? You have to then sit down and ask yourself that, hey, what is it that I do in my day-to-day function that helps me be better than everybody else in this category, right? Let's say I could be, let's say, from a team of salespeople to I'm okay. For instance, I am somebody who's sold his entire life, right? Products of different kinds for that matter. Now, what helps me become better than a room full of other sales people that happen to be there? Is it my approach? Is it my research? Is it my homework? Is it the amount of time I'm simply spending to understand what that particular client is about? Is it the questions I'm asking, right? Most people tend to start looking for answers outside rather than actually sitting down and introspecting. Hey, what is my superpower exactly? What really makes me different from everybody else in the room? And can I bank on that? Maybe I might get 10 rejections to begin with, but can I continue to fight and go on to the 11th one or the 15th one and then make it there too, right? I believe that a lot of this goes hand in hand. The part where you're trying to fight and the part that you feel like nothing's working, and seeing not getting an instant gratification that tends to kind of mess you with your process. And we need to take few steps back and start looking at this entire exercise now as like an exercise like going to the gym, right? When you go to the gym, the gratification isn't instant. You go every single day, but you will notice a few people. There'll be a few people who go to the gym in the first 5 days of lifting weights, will stand in front of a mirror and check themselves out and see how much progress has happened. Versus there are those people that just keep their head down and keep going. And one day, 6 months later, when they've accidentally taken their shirt off, they can't even recognize the person that's out there, right? That's how much it is. I believe the way to go about this in today's time would largely be with that mentality that, hey, I might face rejections repeatedly. And that happens on a daily basis, whether it's the rickshawala, whether it's the vegetable
Yeah.
person you negotiate with, whether it's your partner you're trying to negotiate with, whether it's, that commuter in the train that you're trying to get a seat next to. You're negotiating every single day, but it's not like you're stopping, right?
Right.
Nothing is stopping you from trying to get to that one thing there is in there. So then why not apply that logic to even the process of finding what you want to really do? And before you do that, have you sat down with yourself and asked yourself, what am I really, really good at to begin with? Right? I think the answer to finding everything outside begins within. So, yeah.
I think very well put. Those two takeaways, I think, are really strong ones, and something that I don't know if you would recall working on that together, but that's something that we really ensure that we are focusing on with a lot of our candidates, which is understanding what you are best at, especially compared to 100 other people or 500 other people who are
Yeah.
doing the same kind of roles. Because on paper, if there are, yes, so you've done, let's say, partnerships and growth and all that for 10 years or more. But if there are 100 other people who have the same kind of profile and same kind of expertise, why should I hire you versus those 100 other people? I think that question
Correct.
everybody should ask in today's job market. Absolutely on point. And then the other thing is, I think you do need to figure out what you can do that is different in terms of job search strategy itself. So not just your profile positioning, but how you are
Yeah.
actually becoming visible, or becoming seen as somebody who can go above and beyond outside of just clicking the easy apply button on LinkedIn. So that's where the research comes in. That's where the networking and outreach comes in. Niharika, the next question I have is something where I want to give more structure to our audience today about how to navigate the job market, right? So right now we are discussing the most important factors to keep in mind, some of the key solutions that may have worked for both of you. But when I'm in the middle of it, or I'm just starting my search, at either junctures, I could be highly demotivated because I keep hearing how difficult the job market is. I may have tried 100 jobs, not heard back. So people then lose. I mean, most importantly, they lose their kind of confidence, but they also lose the ability to understand what's next. How do I actually go about in a way where things will drive some tangible results, right? So, what is the structure or what kind of roadmap do you think people can build for themselves? Maybe it's not a rigid roadmap, maybe it's a personalized roadmap, but can you come up with some sort of series of activities which you think can help people just organize themselves, better in such a job market?
Right. So I think in this scenario, what helped me while I was navigating through this situation was keeping my mind space clear. Of course, there were days where I was, finding myself curled up in a corner, and I was wondering whether this will fall into place someday or not. But at the same time, I was also trying to put in efforts to make myself sane, whether it was activities like going to the gym, being more present in the family ecosystem, talking, not getting silent within, and then trying to list out what are the issues that I might want to tackle right away, and maybe there is something which is not a priority I would want to address, but 24 hours later that could also become a priority. For example, um, I would want to understand whether the kind of roles I've had in my recent career, is it something that I want to do, because I would not want to be that rigid in terms of the kind of opportunities I would want to pursue in the near future. Also leave some room for evolution, I would say, for somebody who's become a generalist already, in this case Yash. And I can also say that I've become a marketing generalist now. I started off as a customer marketer, did partnerships, growth, and now leading an entire function. So leaving space for evolution is again one area which I would advise people to be more considerate about, because when we go horse blind after one thing, there's a high chance that other people are also chasing the same goal, right? But that might not leave you uh, with the same amount of opportunities. But when you expand your horizons, when you go after multiple avenues, there's a higher chance that you might come out as a brighter, more fierce, whatsoever you are doing in your respective career. In my case, it was being a marketer. And you might get introduced to more people who, again, so it's like a chain. You speak to one person who can introduce you to other two, then you can also get in touch with them who can introduce you to the other two, and it becomes a chain of network. Start adding them on LinkedIn. And also try to understand whether these kind of opportunities is something that you would be keen to pursue, if not now, in near future. So keeping yourself motivated, speaking to people around you on a constant basis, not getting curled up, not getting shut down. And of course, there are days people face such kind of situations. So I would say address it, but don't go beyond a certain point of time getting absorbed by it, because life never stops. People carry with whatever they are doing on a day-to-day basis. So this is also one approach that we should follow.
Yeah, absolutely. No, very valid points. I think, in terms of structure, we obviously have spent a lot of time at Pivot kind of working with thousands of people, experimenting what works, what doesn't work. And I don't think we have landed on something that works for 100% of people. And I think it's almost foolish to even anticipate, any sort of a framework that would work for everybody. But I think, Yash, your journey also had some sort of a structure which we saw, firsthand, and some parts were frustrating, then more frustrating than the others. But based on that journey, if you were to, let's say, do it again today, what would you do differently? How would you structure that journey for yourself
Okay,
differently?
I think the only one thing I'm going to change in this is tell myself is stop rejecting myself on behalf of the world already. Right? This is something I've realized in this entire process. Dude, the world is sitting out there to judge you, to reject you to begin with. Leave that for them. It's none of your business in terms of worrying about कि shit मैं interview देके आया वो क्या मेरे बारे में सोच रहा है. The analysis paralysis that ends up happening to begin with, it's not your job. What the next person is thinking about you is absolutely none of your business to begin with. Are you true to the fact that what you stand for is something that you can do? Are you true in the fact that okay, the superpower you've identified about yourself, nobody can beat you at it? I think those are the elements that I would go back and focus on. And this one part where that self-doubt creeps in when you don't see immediate success to begin with, I think that's the part. The only thing I'm probably going to tell myself is it's okay. Sir niche rakho aur aage badho, it's going to happen to begin with. If anything, when every time I think in the time period that when we first connected as well, one of the biggest learnings I had about myself, why the introspection exercise itself, was that I am a proof of the fact that you can restart your career as many as number of times to begin with. I started off with recruitments in the investment banking space, then then doing door-to-door sales, and then doing ad spaces selling at Zomato to begin with. Then entered a fintech industry I had no clue about and built out an entire CredPay ecosystem out there to begin with. So and even right now, for in terms of what I am doing, it's an output of having learned what I learned in these different ecosystems to begin with and having come from there. So I am a true believer of the fact that I don't want to be spending my life doing just the one thing to begin with. That's where I get access to doing multiple things, and I like the idea of newness. So for me, that is something that kind of gives me the high. That okay, am I constantly solving an interesting challenge or not to begin with? Right, that's the thing that I go after, and whatever shape and size that can take, as long as I'm up for it, I'll go after that. So for me, it's now reached that stage where I'm like, I think money aa jayega. Like the last 10 years of having worked has told me this कि यार पैसे आ जाएंगे even when I'm not really paying attention to it. Can I now spend time doing something meaningful? Can I now spend time building something that actually makes a difference to begin with? And being able to tell yourself कि it's okay. I think the biggest learning was in those 10 years, in the time periods that I did not know that I'm going to get that offer letter, that fear would creep in कि यार shit अगले महीने का ये बिल कहाँ से भरेंगे करके. But there would also be that line at the back of my mind कि यार कोई बात नहीं, worst case scenario I might end up getting a job that pays me the same money I was making last, or maybe a little lesser than what I was making. But it doesn't mean that I've been ruled out, right? That I'm not going to make any money to begin with. 9 out of 10 times, most people tend to take that job not because they love it, but because it's actually going to be paying their bills. It takes care of some particular motivation at the back of their head to begin with. So I think the key step that one needs to take in their journey today is simply sit back and understand why do they want to do what they are pursuing to begin with. Like this is a question I ask a lot of my friends, and after working for 10 years, is that if you didn't have to do this for the money, would you still continue to do what you're actually doing to begin with? And it's surprising how many people end up saying no, right? But they still wake up the next day, they still go because पता है कि यार ये safe है, हम ये कर सकते हैं. So I think it's a little bit of a disservice if you don't give yourself the option to actually show yourself. And that's the sort of personal level disservice that you end up doing to yourself. But if you can take a little courage, if you're repeatedly taking courage to show up to a job you don't really like, can we take a few steps back and take courage in the direction of doing things we want to like
Right.
do, right? I think that's the approach I would go back and fix and would suggest folks ahead as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is something that, to be very honest, is a thing that many people, ask us when they first come to us. Like, should I continue in this career path or should I change things drastically? And a lot of times, though, you have to ultimately root that decision in what are your main priorities at this stage in your life and your career, right? Because a lot of times you might want to do something different and follow your passion, follow something which really makes you feel alive and get out of bed in the morning. But then again, people have other priorities, like, whether it's pay, whether it's, just safety, security, ensuring that they're supporting their dependents, their family, etc. I think that is something that people have to value. And in a country like India, where we are still, in that sort of transitory phase from going from risk averse to risk taking, I think it might still take a little more time for people to really go after what they really want. But I think it's happening more and more, at least from where I stand. I see more and more people taking that up. I think the part you said earlier, Yash, that is, I think, something that is crucial for most people to understand, which is that the current job market is set up to make you feel that you're not good enough, right? And any person, even I've worked with Stanford and Harvard MBAs who have gotten laid off in the current job market in US, and any person can fall prey to that kind of lack of self confidence and the self doubt creeping in, because they don't anticipate something like this happening in their lives, and they don't anticipate firstly being laid off, they don't anticipate then not getting an offer for the next 6 months, right? So this is new experience for many people who have not done this before, and that frustration can actually lead to downward spiral at times, where you actually, instead of improving your strategy, you kind of end up applying to way more jobs without personalizing, without thinking where you should really apply, and again, doing things which don't result in the actual outcomes they're intending for. So that part I really do agree with. So let's talk a little bit about the sort of emotional and mental resilience that people need to withstand the rejections that are part of this current job market, right? Nobody can escape it. And earlier, if it used to happen, let's say for 80% of the jobs or 90% of the jobs that you apply to, today it's happening for 95% or 98% of the
Yeah.
jobs you're applying to. It's even higher, right? So, Niharika, my question to you is, because rejection rates have increased, people who used to apply to 100 jobs, get rejected from 95, except let's say the 5 jobs. Today they are applying to 300 jobs, getting rejected by I don't know, like 250 or at least 270, not hearing back from many others, and then just maybe hearing back from one or two companies. So rejection rates have increased drastically. How do you withstand it in an emotional and like a mentally
I think in
resilient manner?
that scenario, what you have to understand is nobody knows you better than yourself, right? So whosoever you're reaching out to doesn't know you, doesn't have the capacity to judge you on the basis of just one paper or one application that you're making through a system which is again half judged by AI or halfly intervened by an human. So again, that's what, nobody you knows you better than yourself. You know your strength, you know what you've been doing, how you've been managing yourself to get through, how you have evolved as a person in the last, let's say, 25 years of your journey, which is something that has contributed to where you are and where you will be in next 10 years or 15 years or 25 years for that matter. So trusting yourself again, making a plan around activities that you can carry which can contribute to, let's say, a healing journey in this case, because rejections can be as painful as a bad breakup in some scenarios. So healing yourself, trying to make yourself better, and of course going after a structured approach is going to help in most cases. But sometimes what happens is you don't really know what might or might not work out. So keep, as I mentioned, always keep your avenues open, always keep eyeing for opportunities which is not a part of your comfort zone. So keeping yourself held up, keep your heads high. I am a true believer of manifestation. So maybe training your minds in a way or capacity where you say yourself, you say this to yourself on a daily basis, that if not today, we'll get through someday. If not today, then there's second day, there's third day, there's day 10, there's day 15. Life never stops. So kind of training yourself in that module where you know that if you are at X value today, you would be X plus one tomorrow, because you're growing, you're evolving as a human, and you're also acquiring skills which is of course enabling you to be a good fit or a better match for the opportunities that you are applying to, which might of course materialize in, let's say, a week, month, year, depends. But keeping yourself more open in order to evolve, um, and yes, just being believing in yourself is something that is going to get through you.
No, very true. I think thanks for sharing that. I think being more confident about your capabilities regarding you, being able to not just navigate the job market, but that you'll still be able to do that job that you're applying for because you've done it before, right? You've proven yourself before. So changing the goalpost every single time, it doesn't help. Like if yes, you have not been able to land a job, that doesn't mean you won't be able to do a good job for that role that you're applying for. It's just that the perception around your application for some reason or the other did not match your expectations. So I think that is very important point. Now there are a couple of questions we are starting to get from the audience in the chat here, and I'm glad that they're coming up because I feel like some of the things that we have been discussing have been a little more high level, and I really want to get into the specifics here because I think some of the people are looking for very concrete and granular guidance as well. Um, One of the things that we have here from Sakshi is, I'll bring the question up on the screen, how to make LinkedIn connections an active part of your network. So this is something, which I think all of us have talked about extensively, where LinkedIn has really blown up as not just a job board, but really a networking tool. And I think earlier, if there were maybe in India, 10 million people who were active on LinkedIn and networking, trying to get referrals. Today there are, I think, almost at least 40, 50 million people. So much higher number of people who are active on LinkedIn now. So Yash, I know we worked extensively on utilizing LinkedIn, and I think you have generally been somebody who has used
Yeah.
the power of networking and outreach to land jobs. You even spoke about that. I'd love to understand, based on the work we did together and your own approaches, what have you found to be the most effective ways of utilizing LinkedIn today, especially when it comes to landing your target role? How do
Sure.
you navigate
So,
that?
firstly, for me, historically, applying to a job portal, going via an HR, sending out an email application with my CV has never worked. Not even once have I ever landed any of my jobs from applying to a portal to begin with. In fact, from the very get go, I remember when I was going into my role at Zomato as well. I used to be somebody that used to review restaurants back in the day before I'd started working when Zomato was just a review platform to begin with. And it's while exploring that review part of the platform when I just accidentally discovered their section of come work with us to begin with. There was this one line I remember that was written over there: our office is always stocked with free pizzas to begin with. I think that was something I saw and I flew with it, and I instantly reached out to somebody that reached out to my friend circle, where it turns out somebody used to work in Zomato back in the day to begin with. And I remember, while my interview process with them was going on, I also interviewed with 7 other companies at the same time, got a role in all those places, but none of those jobs were were feeling like मैं कुछ उखाड़ रहा हूँ यहाँ पे to begin with. Versus where I remember while interviewing at Zomato, I remember the interviewer telling me, "देख भाई, it'll rain, it'll snow, it'll be hot to begin with. You have to go out on the field and you have to sell. There is no to that to begin with. Are you willing to do that?" It's after hearing this is when I went and interviewed in other places and realized that I still want to go do this to begin with. But that didn't start because I applied on a job portal. That started because I decided to have a conversation about it with someone. Between my time at Zomato and Cred as well, I remember reaching out to several people, somebody who was the director of India at Netflix, somebody who was the director at Spotify to begin with, like all the brands. So I asked myself after getting out of nearing my time at Zomato was, what's the next company I want to go work for? And the first thing I did was I opened up my phone. I saw what are the apps that I'm using to begin with. Are these apps basically listed in India? As do they happen to have like companies over here? Am I somebody who uses them? And then after that, I started writing these romanticized versions of like messages to senior people at these companies to begin with. And I've heard back from all of them. Even if they've said that, hey, we don't have a job for you, they've always responded back saying that, hey, we love the fact that you love our product to begin with. Would love to figure out something with you at some point in time, but unfortunately, we don't have something. I got my job at Credit exactly like that. They didn't even have a role for me in Bombay listed on their platform. I reached out to somebody very randomly. Not only did I reach out to them, I pitched myself in like a small paragraph over there. I instantly got on a call with them within the next 20 minutes, interviewed with them, got rejected for that interview, but because they loved the effort shown, they re-interviewed me for another role altogether, and that's how I got my 3 years with them. So for me, that's never been the case. Even what I'm
Wow.
building right now at PartnerPod to begin with did not happen because there was a job post. In fact, my founder at PartnerPod, she happens to be an ex-manager both at Zomato and at Cred as well. And we used to just randomly interact with each other's LinkedIn posts. Now we go 10 years back, but we were not people that would pick up the phone or socialize with each other outside of work. And randomly, with one LinkedIn interaction itself, we just ended up, finally texting one another and had a conversation. Cut to 2 hours of coffee later, it's been 4 months that I'm now doing this, and it's been one of the best experiences. Like, the work I have done in the last 4 months feels like I haven't done like this in the last 5 years to begin with, right? Most, in fact, not just most, all 99% of all your next roles, 99% of all your next jobs could basically still be sitting within your own circle. The question is, how many people are you reaching out to and having that conversation with? How many times are you basically trying to, try to do something different that is basically working for somebody else but not working for you, or vice versa to begin with? And I think those things are very, very important to do. And I think you should also remind yourself of a little bit of when you were kids to begin with, when you wanted something from your parents and you would try your usual method and it wouldn't work. What is that one thing you would do differently and that would catch their attention? I think we tend to forget that. And that part is very important to go back to. कि यार अगर मैं थोड़ा सा ड्रामा करता था नहीं मिलता था, but let's say if I was doing another task and that caught their attention, can I try something like that with myself over here? Right? There are a lot of those lessons in our childhood that we've kind of
Yep.
gone through. We just tend to forget these while in our journey while growing up to begin with. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think terrific points. Thanks for highlighting kind of the subtle things that people miss when they're thinking about networking and outreach. Usually the advice that we hear or sometimes even give, to be very candid, is it's effective, but it's very mechanical. It's very tuck tuck tuck. Just go search for XYZ people, use these templates, customize them. But I think, why does this work? Why are people more responsive to certain messages versus others? I think if you really get to the bottom of that, human behavior science that's behind it, I think if people understood the why better, and that's what you're highlighting here, Yash, I think they would do it more effectively. Right now, I think what's happened in the market is people are seeing it just as a way to
Yeah.
get their foot in the door when job portals have stopped working. So it's kind of just like a very mechanical,
Yeah.
dry process, right? And most people again are going after volume, not quality, right? They're thinking like, okay, how can I reach out to 20 people in one day with the same message and just
Yeah.
move on if they don't respond? But I think it's the quality, the positioning, the clarity with which you write that message and who you are reaching out to. I think that all really matters. I think you and Niharika both talked about what kind of work has to go into those kind of messages, right? Like, it's not just going to flow on its own. You really have to put some hard work behind that, whether it's research, whether it's improving your content writing
Yeah.
skills or something else. So I'm glad you answered it in the way you did, because most people would actually, even, I'll be very honest, even myself would answer it in a very different way. And yours is slightly more, I think, qualitative and like inspiring to hopefully many people who are in the room. We have suddenly a barrage of questions rolling in. So
Sorry, Arjun, I just wanted to
go ahead,
add
Yash.
actually
I think
one
you were going
point,
to
and
say
this was
something. But
something I discovered in the journey with Pivot
yeah,
itself. There's this mentor of mine, Karan Batija, who was a part of the Pivot network, and during one of our mentor network sessions, he ended up saying this one line. Yash, like when you are basically applying to a company, are you ever asking yourself what's in it for them to want to entertain you to begin with? Like, every time you're basically trying to reach out to the next person there is, are you asking yourself, or are you simply telling yourself, hey, I happen to be special, I come with this, which is why you need to pay attention, right? I think spending some time trying to
yeah,
understand what's in it for the next person that you're reaching out to, or what's in it for that company that you're reaching out to, is also another thing that kind of plays into the way you start reaching out to people. Because then what will happen is, rather than reaching out to 100 brands out there, you will qualitatively reach out to probably 10, but your chances of success will be significantly higher in these 10 than in the 100 that you've reached out to. So yeah, that's the only point I wanted to add.
yeah, absolutely. The next one. So we have a very good question here, and I think we sort of covered it earlier, but at a very high level. And I think, Niharika, it would be good if you could share your input here. How do you balance financial urgency with strategic career moves when offers aren't rolling in or coming across quickly? I think really good question. I think both Yash and you were talking about some of these elements. So how would you advise Deepak in this? situation.
Right. So I think for this, I think the very first and very basic move is to be prepared for the future overall, not just from your job aspect. It could be any sort of emergency. You need to have some sort of savings, some sort of a fallback option for yourself. At the same time, of course, this is a very unpredictable thing. Nobody thinks about being laid off or being kicked out of an organization. So there could be instances where you might not be able to pay the bill for the next few months, let's say. You have to understand that we all are humans. We all go through such situations in one way or the other, whether it's job loss, whether it's some sort of medical emergency. But what do we have immediately next to us is our network. It is our family, it is our friends, holding on to them, taking help. And also there are going to be times where you are also going to be in a position where you are going to help somebody out in their need of time. So holding on close to them, being more prepared, and being more confident in a way where you understand that this is a temporary situation, this will pass, this is not going to be a lifelong situation. And the early that you can come out of this, the early that you can prepare yourself in a way where you are evolving on a day-to-day basis, is actually getting you closer to your next role, is going to help you out. And yeah, that's something that even I did. So for understanding what do I have currently as my landscape and who do I have in my immediate network who would be or could be a great fallback option, because that's how we operate. We are social animals. We need to have some sort of connection in order to keep us more comfortable in bad
Hmm.
times or in times of need.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yash, any thoughts on this question from
I
you?
think, yeah. So, in particular, let's say if I can't, so the way I would look at this is that, hey, if I can't go and invent a new wheel, can I go back and reinvent the same one I had? Right? Because there is still validation of the fact that I am coming from some place, right? I've already done the work, which has kind of led me to a position which where I'm thinking that, okay, now a strategic move makes sense in order for me to go in that direction. But yes, as Niharika mentioned, that getting laid off is an unforeseen situation to begin with, right? And there's a lot of times we go through our jobs blowing through our paychecks month on month, not thinking about what the future is going to be like because of the number of hours you've put into it. So that's a very understandable situation, and yes, that can happen to all of us to begin with. But the key thing to remind yourself is that, hey, if you are not going to get the next thing that you're going to go after immediately, is there a way for you to go back to the thing that you came from? Right? Because you already have done the work. That is something that you already know. Now you might not be able to go back to the same company, but there'll be 10 other people that are probably looking for the exact same thing. Can you then use all of that you have built over the course of your years and then start helping 10 other people go in that direction? And that's something that and this is something that kind of ended up working for me as well, because in the time period that we started kind of working together, what it used to be 5 years ago versus what it was right now, I realized that it's not me, but it's the system that it's has been designed this way at this point in time, that I'm now applying to 100 roles and still I'm not kind of hearing back to begin with. So cool, is this the only universe I can go to? Can I, in that case, break this completely, go build something of my own to begin with, which ends up paying me? And that is the place where I'm at right now. And even without having realized, 4 months of having done that have already gone by. And here now today, because we ended up taking this step, it's given me more access than I had in the last 6 months to begin with. I think so. That is very important to us. And the only thing I'm making the most of right now is the core thing I learned in my journey, which is building partnerships. So I figured that, okay, if I can't go do this for an established brand, there are way too many new brands that are still looking to come up to begin with. Can I offer my skill set to these guys and become somebody that is important to them, and eventually use that wave to then go to where I want to go? Because eventually we'll get to where we want to. How we get there is purely going to boil down to how do you make the most of what you have in hand today?
Yeah, valid points. All right, let's get to the next question here. I want to get to as many as possible because we are almost running out of time. So we have a question from Sakshi about people. Do people still tend to respond similarly on LinkedIn, similar platforms these days? I think I'll just take this one very quickly because I think we have answered this in a more detailed and a more, I think, important way where we talked about what are the kind of messages you should send, what are the kind of people you should target. I think yes, people are responding. Sakshi, that's what we have seen. We have worked with over 8,000 professionals so far. One of the best strategies, which is helping people land more jobs or at least get more interviews is reaching out to them on either LinkedIn or through emails or certain other platforms as well, where it might be an industry specific community. Like there are Reddit threads which have suddenly blown up, and there are a lot of people using more and more Reddit than before. So there are all these different communities and channels. You have to be very strategic about which ones make most sense for you. LinkedIn is obviously the most popular and all encompassing, but there are other more niche communities which may have more active participants engagement happening for your specific niche, right? So you need to figure out what's that for you. Do a bit of research. You'll probably be able to easily identify if you're already an industry professional, you will know what those communities are. The I think the biggest trick here between not getting a response and getting a response is what Niharika and Yash have shared earlier, which is being very strategic, mindful, and put a lot of hard work behind the messaging that you put. So I'll just share that, and I think with that we can try and take some other questions that we have here. Um, there's one question from Himani, and this is slightly different than what we typically tackle because this is more from a fresher's perspective. So Himani would like to have some insights for freshers with a career gap when companies are expecting 2 years experience even for entry level roles. Um, yeah, that's an interesting one to take up. I
So,
would invite either of you to take this one up.
Niharika, do you want to take this or should I take this?
Sure, I mean, I can take this up and you can add to it.
Take it.
So
Yeah, please
Himani,
go ahead.
for
Yeah.
in my recent experience, what I've seen is if you write a really compelling message or an email to the person who's directly responsible for making hiring decisions, that is mostly like to going mostly like to likely going to be the C-suite people, the CEO or founder, because in bigger organizations there's a chance that you might get through but you might not convert in terms of the offer that you're expecting. But in startups currently, because the scale of startups is also growing in India, we are seeing a disruption in different kind of areas where new startups are coming up. You can directly reach out to founders, and these people are very quick, they are very responsive, they share profiles like left, right, center.
Yeah.
I have my founder daily sharing different profiles to me that Niharika, look it up. And then because you're reaching out to them directly, getting noticed is a higher probability. And then you might, in startup they don't really care about your experience that much. They look for the intent, they look for the hunger. Is it something that drives you, is it something that you're looking forward to build on in your early career, which is going to give you that amount of exposure, because that is something which a startup ecosystem actually offers in today's day and age. So I think reaching out to the right people and trying to understand whether you have some sort of access to a low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
When I mention low hanging fruit, I say I talk about the kind of companies that you can work with which are very active on LinkedIn, which has a dedicated person who's responding to messages that is being sent to them in one way or other, whether that is via Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. So you see, if these guys are active on either of the channels, then there's a high probability that there might be somebody who would also be reading your messages. So just being consistent in pushing out those kind of channelizing those kind of messages from your end, and trying to figure out whether you are reaching to the right person is going to make hell lot of a difference in your career, and establishing yourself in that journey.
I have a slightly different, but in addition to kind of a point on this, and to that the answer would be, guys, the number of companies that are popping up on a daily basis, there's no dearth of it to begin with, right? Most of the times when you end up applying for a job, there is some sense of biasness that kind of comes in with respect to, array, it should be a cool company to apply for, it should be paying this kind, yeah, itna recognized hona chahiye karke. A lot of the cool brands that you're gunning to go after started as unknown names to begin with. And there are way too many founders. Like if you open up LinkedIn, you will hear at least 10 founders basically posting something or the other, like, pushing out some kind of gyan or the other to begin with. Are you then taking the time to actually just go through that? Because right now, whether you like it or not, you have all that time at the hand. It's not like it's going, aap kuch naya kar rahe ho uske sath. You are, but the one thing that you're consistently doing is you're consistently putting the exact same effort of going out and researching to begin with. But there needs to be that one change in between, the part where you tell yourself ki shit, ye company ne ha nahi bola, ye company ne ha nahi bola, cool. There are 10 new companies that are still opening on a daily basis. Rather than telling yourself that hey, I am unemployable to begin with, ask yourself if you're actually in fact looking in a direction where there are companies you haven't discovered, for that matter, right? There'll be way too many things that will come out, and you are only looking for an entry point right now. It doesn't have to be your forever as well. You can start there, get your foot in the door, get some runway financially, get some runway from a reference point of view in terms of what you have built, and then eventually shift. There is nobody stopping you from doing that. Today, your objective is to get to the shore, not build the castle on the shore to begin with. Just keep that in mind and just head in that direction accordingly.
Yeah, very well said. I think that's a lot of very practical insights that you can apply right away. Himani, I hope that was helpful. Um, just give me one second. I think there are a couple of other questions. I'm not sure if you will have time to take them all up. So I'm just seeing which one's the one that is most unique that we haven't already covered and also would not take a lot of time. All right. I think Thomas has a question here. It's a pretty long one, but I'll quickly go through it. So he's currently posting more content on LinkedIn about process as a product designer manager using AI and creating new products for his portfolio and Gen AI experiments. Also commenting on other people's posts. I'm getting more exposure, but not offers yet. How would you leverage this to get more opportunities? Um, have either of you, Niharika or Yash, did you create a lot of content on LinkedIn? Did you become really active in terms of engaging with other people's content during your job search? And if not, then why not? And if so, then how did it help you?
So, in my case, particularly, I realized that if I have to use LinkedIn as a tool to basically go find more people out there from a job perspective, my focus was always in terms of reaching out to people rather than spending time building content to begin with. I realized that content is not my strength, which is why staying consistent with it repeatedly became a challenge. But engaging with the people that I want to work with did still keep me a little bit relevant to begin with. So, yes, I did spend enough time in that time period where I wasn't building content, just reading through the content of what other people were saying, sharing my appreciation for that content without even actually going with the objective ki, "Acha, theek hai, I need to get a job out of this." It was just simply keeping myself warm. And from there, even that basic an interaction would maybe end up leading to one new conversation that would end up happening out of the blue to begin with. Like the most amount of reach outs that I've had with people has also been when I'm just simply posting in the comments, basically with somebody agreeing and you re-engaging to begin with, right? It's about how you're looking at that problem also kind of plays a strong role over here. Because if you're only focused on the fact that hey, I'm posting content, I'm engaging with people's this thing, but I'm still not getting job offers, maybe then let's look at what some of the most popular people that have succeeded on the platform are actually doing. Are there any playbooks that you can basically replicate? Is there somebody you admire on the platform that is doing something really right, and maybe just reach out to them and understand from them, hey, what's your strategy like? Because everyone that's built it up on LinkedIn loves to share how they've built it up on LinkedIn, right? These people love to talk and tell you that hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, this is what I did. They take a live situation and turn it into five product lessons, that they've kind of got into it. So people have the dirt to kind of go out and engage to kind of talk to you to begin with. If you don't find responses in your current methods, maybe shifts that one something in there that you think could basically make a difference, and try at it again. At the end of the day, it's not a perfect game for anyone to begin with, right? For everyone this operates differently, and you need to keep going at it, for that matter. That's how this is going to happen.
Fair
Yeah, I
enough.
think even
Niharika, please feel free.
yeah. So in fact, I would say don't just stick to LinkedIn, because what happens is when you're uh, belonging to a niche segment. For example, if you're going after product designer or manager kind of roles, there are different communities that are operating in the ecosystem, right? As a marketer, I'm a part of at least 20-25 Slack channels or Discord communities or circle communities where people produce content, and also we see a lot of UGC around it. Like people engage with it, add to it, and then have that content multiplied in various ways and avenues. And there you can reach out to them in a much more intimate setting rather than reaching out to somebody on a LinkedIn and just keep on spamming them in their emails and waiting for them to respond. But if you see somebody who's posting in a community on a regular basis, there's a high chance they might respond to your personal DM as well. So again, making use of other channels as well is going to help. So in our language, we call this omni channel marketing, basically reaching out to somebody via multiple channels and avenues. We send them text, we send them WhatsApp, Facebook nudges, Instagram. We want to be everywhere, so we make sure that whatever channel can give us the maximum ROI, and in this case it could be a response. I would rather go after that, multiply the avenues that I have, and make use of all of it at the maximum capacity it can offer me, rather than just sticking to one channel and blindly hoping that somebody might respond one day, which again is a 50-50% chance that might
Yeah.
happen or might not happen.
I have one other example to add over here, and this is specifically for Thomas, right? Because this is a tried and tested mechanism. This is how I technically got a founder's attention. Basically, now I have wanted to break in this particular industry for a while. That the wellness industry as a whole, and I realized that in the past I've done the mailing the founder thing, the applying the job wala thing, reaching out to people, and none of this has worked. But then I also found myself to be a customer of one of their brands to begin with. So here's what happened. I made a purchase journey to begin with. And when I was done with my purchase journey, I ended up spotting a few gaps because I'm somebody who's also worked with a lot of user first products to begin with. I realized that, hey, if they could change something like this, if they could change something like that. And they started off with something as simple as the product that they have priced on their website during the discount time was still appearing to the same as the non-discount time period. It literally started from that. I started an email chain with a founder with something like this that went on for 2 months. And now we reached a conversation where they said that, hey, you can actually fix so many things there are. Can we please work together to begin with? It started literally from the love of the brand, from trying and helping them understand and being absolutely clear from the get go that, hey, this is only coming from the fact that I have worked in these ecosystems, but this is coming for the love of the brand. Can that be something that you apply? Because Thomas mentioned that he's building new products for his portfolio, Gen AI experiments that he's doing. Then could there be a brand that he absolutely loves, can shop with them, and in that experience help them understand that, hey, if you could tweak a few things like this, maybe this could kind of get you a better conversion. That also makes you stand out significantly loudly than everybody else in the crowd there is. And that is something a brand loves, that when a consumer actually points out an issue and then eventually they make the consumer a part of the team. That's how I got into Zomato. That's pretty much how I'm having this conversation with the current founder as well. So that is definitely an angle you should check out.
Yeah, I think very, 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 I would say deliberately strategic and mindful kind of an approach. We are doing the research, but more than research, you're actually giving them some actionable insights to work upon. I think that is really, really helpful rather than just saying, I've gone through your website and I understand it. You're basically suggesting key areas of improvement. And if it actually works, great. Even if it doesn't work, it shows that you're going above and beyond and really, trying to make a difference.
Yeah.
All right. I think that was a very productive and insightful session. Thank you both for joining me today and going through the nuts and bolts of your journey. I especially like that you really balanced both the the insights with kind of the morale boost that people need at this time. There's a lot of stress associated with job search in the market, as we first opened this topic with. So I'm really glad that you touched upon both of those sort of the hard and the softer aspects of this journey. And I hope everybody who joined us today, that you found something to take away from this session that you can actually apply. And if you do share it with us. You can follow Pivot on LinkedIn. You can also reach out to Yash and Niharika on LinkedIn in case there's something insightful you found. Share it with them. Initiate conversations. That's how you would learn more. That's how you would grow your network as well. But yeah, thanks again, everybody, for joining on a Thursday evening. Really, really appreciate your time. And special thanks to Niharika and Yash again. Thank you so much, folks, for making time for this. And I
Thank you
hope you
so
have
much,
a great
Arjun,
rest
for
of the
hosting
evening.
this.
Thank you for having us, Arjun. This was a great chat.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right.